Finally, a day without the drama queen. That was the caption under a family photo my daughter-in-law posted. My son at the head of my dining table, my granddaughter smiling, my chair empty. I read it in the hospital after I collapsed at work. The nurses told me they had called my son. He didn't come. The timestamp on her post matched the hour they tried to reach him, which told me everything I needed to know. For 3 years, I had let them live in my house, thinking it was temporary, telling myself I was helping while I paid the bills and stayed out of the way. Seeing that post made the story clear. I wasn't being cared for, I was being pushed out. So I made one phone call to someone I trusted, and I started taking my life back. This is where the real part begins. My name is Marjorie Latham. I'm 63 years old, and I used to be an elementary school teacher. I retired a few years ago after my husband Samuel passed away. I thought I had done everything right in life, worked hard, raised my son, paid off my house. I believed that when I got older, I'd have peace, maybe even a little comfort. I didn't expect to end up in a hospital bed by myself, trying to calm my heartbeat while the machines beside me beeped like a metronome. The nurse checking my IV smiled gently and asked if someone was coming to pick me up. I said, "My son will be here soon." I said it because it sounded right, not because I was sure. She nodded and walked away, probably thinking what a nice family I must have. I looked at the clock on the wall and realized the hospital had already called him an hour ago. I tried not to take it personally. Maybe he was stuck in traffic. Maybe he was busy. I always gave him the benefit of the doubt. I reached for my phone just to distract myself, and there it was, a notification. Tara Whitmore Latham tagged you in a photo. Tara is my daughter-in-law. I thought she was checking in, maybe posting something like, "Get well soon, Mom." I opened it without thinking much. It took a few seconds for the picture to load, and when it did, I froze. It was a family dinner photo. My son Evan sat at the head of my dining table, the same table Samuel and I had bought together 30 years ago. Tara sat right next to him, smiling proudly. My granddaughter Lydia was laughing at something out of frame. The lights looked warm, the food looked good, and everything looked perfect, except for one thing. My chair, the one at the end of the table, was empty. Then I saw the caption. Finally, a day without the drama queen. Peaceful dinner, family first. I read it twice to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. 47 likes. Comments from people I knew, one of my in-laws, a few of Tara's friends, laughing emojis, little hearts. I just sat there, staring at that screen while the hospital machines clicked and beeped beside me. It wasn't shock exactly. It was more like something heavy settling into place. I had spent years trying to be kind, trying not to complain, trying to be understanding. I let them move into my house after Samuel died. I told myself it was temporary, that it would help them get on their feet, that family helps family. I paid the bills. I stayed out of their way. I believed that being generous would keep us close. Looking at that post, I realized what it had really done. It made me invisible. My phone buzzed again. Someone had liked the photo. I turned the screen face down on the blanket and looked around the room. The walls were pale gray. The curtain between the beds had a small tear at the bottom. The smell of disinfectant hung in the air. Across from me, another patient coughed and groaned softly. A nurse passed by, humming to herself. It all felt far away, like I was watching my own life from the outside. When the nurse came back with papers for me to sign, she asked again if my son was coming. I said no, that I'd call a taxi. She hesitated, then smiled politely, like she didn't want to show pity. She wished me good luck, and I could tell she meant it. I nodded, thanked her, and waited until she left before I picked up my phone again. I opened the photo one more time. Evan looked so proud sitting there. He had his father's shoulders and my eyes, but there was something in his smile I didn't recognize anymore. Maybe it was always there, and I just never wanted to see it. Tara looked perfect as always. Hair done, everything matching, everything under control. I used to admire that about her. Now, looking at her hand resting on my table, my dishes, my home, I just felt tired. 3 years ago, when they moved in, I thought we were helping each other heal after losing Samuel. Evan said, "Mom, it's too much for you to live here alone. We'll stay until you figure out what you want." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. Somewhere along the way, the words changed. "We'll stay" turned into, "This is our home now." As I sat there in that hospital bed reading that caption again, I finally understood that I wasn't part of their family story anymore. I was the footnote, the background noise. The drama queen. My chest tightened, not from fear, but from something closer to anger. Quiet, steady anger that didn't burn. It focused. I wasn't dying. I was waking up. When I got my discharge papers, I signed them without saying a word. The nurse asked if I needed help getting dressed, and I told her no. I put on my coat, folded the hospital blanket neatly on the bed, and picked up my bag. My hands were steady. My heart rate monitor beeped once more, then stopped as she unplugged it. The silence after that sound felt like a reset. I ordered a taxi to take me home, but as I waited in the lobby, I scrolled through my contacts and found a name I hadn't called in years. Gloria Merriman. She used to be my friend back when we both taught at the same school. After she retired, she went into real estate. Practical, smart, the kind of woman who always gets things done. When she answered, her voice was cheerful. "Marjorie, it's been forever. How are you?" I looked at the hospital doors, at people coming and going with flowers, with family, with company. I took a deep breath. "Gloria," I said, "do you remember my house on Birchwood Lane?" "Of course," she said. "That beautiful two-story with the maple tree in front. What about it?" I paused for a second. "I want to sell it." There was a small silence on the other end. "Are you sure? That's your family home, isn't it?" I felt something cold and calm settle in my chest. "Not anymore," I said. She didn't ask questions after that. "All right," she said, "I'll set things up." When I hung up, I didn't feel sad. I didn't even feel angry. I just felt done. Whatever came next, it would be mine. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was taking something back. That phone call was the start of everything. After Samuel's funeral, the house felt wrong in a way that's hard to explain. It wasn't quiet, not really. The refrigerator hummed, the pipes clanked, the clock on the wall ticked like always, but everything sounded different without him there. The noise made the silence worse. I tried to keep busy, to pretend I was adjusting, but most days I just moved from one room to another, unsure what to do with myself. Evan started coming by after work. He'd bring little things, a bag of pastries, a few groceries, sometimes flowers he said Lydia had picked out. He'd sit with me for a while, tell me about his day, ask if I was eating properly. It felt nice, having him around again. Tara came too sometimes, full of polite smiles and perfect timing. She'd take my hand and say things like, "We just want to make sure you're not lonely, Mom." I wanted to believe her. One evening after dinner, Evan said, "Mom, it's too much for you to stay here alone. This house is too big. You shouldn't have to manage all this." Tara nodded right away as if she'd been waiting for him to say it. "He's right," she said. "It's not good for you to be surrounded by all these memories. It keeps you stuck. We've been thinking maybe we could stay here for a while, just until you decide what you want to do next." I remember feeling relieved, almost grateful. The idea of having family close made sense. I said yes right away. I didn't ask for details or a time frame. I told them it would be nice to have the house feel alive again. When moving day came, it didn't feel like a move-in. It felt like a takeover. They came with boxes, furniture, storage bins, toys, decorations. Tara directed everything like she was running a show. "Let's put this couch in the garage for now," she said, snapping her fingers lightly. "It's sweet, but the fabric's really dated. We'll bring in something lighter, more open." I said quietly, "It's comfortable." She smiled without missing a beat. "Of course it is, Mom, but comfort isn't everything. We all need a little refresh, don't we?" I remember the way she said "we," even though none of her changes ever included me. They painted the walls next. Tara chose a shade she called Morning Mist. I stood in the hallway watching her roll the paint over the faded wallpaper Samuel and I had picked together 30 years ago. I tried to tell her to leave it, that I liked the old pattern, but she laughed gently. "Oh, come on, Mom," she said. "You can't hold on to everything. We're just giving the place a fresh start. It's still your home." But it didn't feel like mine anymore, not even a little. A few weeks later, I noticed that Samuel's photo was gone from the living room shelf. In its place was a framed picture of Evan and Tara on a beach somewhere. I found the old photo tucked in a drawer under some mail. I took it out and put it back on the shelf, right where it had been. The next day, it was gone again. When I asked Tara about it, she looked at me with that calm, patient smile she used whenever she wanted to sound reasonable. "Oh, that? I just thought it might be too hard for you to see him every day. I mean, grief takes time, right?" I'm only thinking of you." There was something so gentle about the way she said it that it almost sounded kind, until I heard the edge underneath. From then on, little things started disappearing. The old armchair Samuel used to sit in while reading gone. My floral curtains replaced with plain white ones. My coffee mug swapped for a matching set she'd bought. She called it streamlining. She said it made the house look more adult. One evening, she came into my room while I was folding laundry. She leaned on the door frame, crossed her arms, and said, "You know, Mom, it's amazing how different the place feels now. It's lighter, brighter. Don't you think?" I said, "It feels different." She smiled like I'd agreed with her. That's what I mean. Different can be good. Evan stayed out of it mostly. He'd just tell me everything Tara did was to help, that she had an eye for improvement. When I told him I missed how the house used to be, he sighed and said, "Mom, you can't live in the past forever. Dad wouldn't want that." That one hurt more than I expected. After that, I stopped saying much. I learned to stay quiet when Tara rearranged things or cleaned out clutter. I started keeping Samuel's things in a small box under my bed. His watch, his reading glasses, a few old photos. I told myself that as long as I still had those, I hadn't lost everything. One Saturday morning, Tara came in holding paint samples. I was thinking of redoing the guest room. Lydia needs her own space. You could move your things upstairs for now. It'll give her room to grow. I said softly, "I thought that was my room." She tilted her head like she was surprised. "Of course it is, but you said you wanted her to feel at home here, didn't you? You've got that cozy little space upstairs. It'll be perfect for you. It's quieter." It wasn't quiet. It was small, cold, and smelled of old boxes. But I moved anyway. It was easier than arguing. After that, everything changed faster. Evan started managing the bills to make things simpler. He redirected the mail to save me the trouble. Tara stopped asking for permission when she made changes. One day I came home to find the kitchen completely redone. My old dishes were gone. She said she donated them. "Oh, Mom," she laughed when she saw my face. "You should have seen the cracks in those old plates." "Don't worry, I saved one. You can keep it if you're sentimental." There was no malice in her tone, at least not the kind you can name. Just a sweetness that made it impossible to call out. Months passed. They threw a housewarming party. Tara invited her friends, Evan's coworkers, even some neighbors I didn't know. I wasn't asked to help. I stayed upstairs and listened to the laughter through the floor. When I came down later to get some water, there were crumbs and glasses everywhere. Tara was cleaning up. She looked at me and smiled. "You missed a great night. Everyone said the house finally feels like a home." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. That night, I sat in my small upstairs room, holding Samuel's photo in my lap. The house was quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet as before. This one wasn't empty. It was full of other people's voices, other people's lives. It wasn't mine anymore. I heard Tara laughing downstairs, her voice sharp and bright, and then Evan saying something I couldn't make out. I listened for a long time. Eventually, I put the photo back in the box and turned off the light. That was the moment I realized the house didn't belong to me anymore. It hadn't for a long time. About 2 months after they settled in, Tara started talking about space again. She said Lydia was growing fast, that she needed her own room, that it wasn't fair for her to share a space with storage boxes and guest beds. I remember sitting at the kitchen table while she talked, nodding like I agreed, even though I knew what she was really saying. "Mom," she said, stirring her coffee like she was thinking of something hard to say, "you know how much we appreciate you letting us stay here. It's been so good for Lydia, but she's at that age where she needs her own room. Maybe you could rent a small apartment nearby? You'd still be close to us, and it would give us a bit of breathing room, just until we figure out the next step." Evan sat next to her, quiet, looking anywhere but at me. I could see the guilt on his face, but he didn't say a word. Tara reached for my hand, gave it a little squeeze, and added, "You deserve your own space, too. Somewhere cozy just for you. You've done enough for everyone. Let us return the favor." I wanted to ask her how being pushed out of my own home was supposed to be a favor, but I didn't. I just smiled and said I'd think about it. 2 weeks later, I signed a lease on a small apartment near the center of town. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a small balcony that faced a parking lot. It was quiet. It was clean. It didn't feel like home. No one came to help me move. No one even stood on the porch to wave goodbye. Evan texted me once that day, "Hope the move goes smoothly, Mom." That was all. I remember standing in the empty living room of my new apartment, surrounded by boxes that smelled like paint and cardboard, and realizing I'd left my life behind without anyone noticing. I tried to visit sometimes. At first, Tara seemed polite about it, but I could tell I was no longer welcome. "We're just so busy these days, Mom," she would say. "Lydia's schedule is packed and we've got work, and the house is always a mess. Maybe call first next time?" So I started calling first. Some days, no one picked up. Other days, she answered but told me it wasn't a good time. When I did stop by, she'd greet me at the door with that bright, practiced smile. "Oh, Mom, we weren't expecting you today. I wish you told us earlier. We would have tidied up." I always told her it was fine. I'd stand there holding a bag of groceries or a small cake, trying to peek past her shoulder to catch a glimpse of Lydia. Most times, Tara would step into the doorway, just enough to block my view. "She's upstairs studying," she'd say. "Don't want to interrupt her rhythm. Maybe next weekend?" A year later, I decided to stop calling first. It was a Sunday afternoon, sunny and warm. I brought a basket of fruit and a photo album I'd found while unpacking. I thought Lydia might like to see pictures of her grandfather. When I reached the front door, something looked different. The handle was new, shinier. I tried my old key. It didn't fit. I knocked. Tara opened the door halfway. "Oh, Mom," she said, eyebrows raised, her tone light but cold. "You didn't get our message? We had the locks changed a few weeks ago. Security reasons, you know. There have been break-ins around the area." I stood there for a moment, holding the basket, unsure what to say. "I just wanted to drop this off," I said, lifting it slightly. She smiled. "That's sweet. Lydia's upstairs with a friend. I don't want to interrupt their study time. You can just leave it here. I'll give it to her later." As I stepped back, I noticed the hallway wall behind her. The photo that used to hang there, the wedding picture of Samuel and me, was gone. In its place was a large framed picture of Evan and Tara, smiling in matching outfits, standing in front of the house. I pointed to it before I could stop myself. That used to be our wedding photo. Tara glanced back, then turned to me, her expression soft, but her voice firm. "I know, Mom. I thought it was time for something new. You understand, right? It's our home now. We're making memories here, too." Evan appeared behind her then, still in his weekend clothes. He didn't look at me directly. "Don't get upset, Mom. It's not a big deal." I nodded slowly. "No, it's not," I said quietly. "It's your house now." Tara smiled, relieved. "Exactly. But don't worry, you're always welcome here." I stepped back onto the porch. "Of course," I said. Then I looked at her straight in the eye. "But the name on the deed is still mine?" Her smile faltered for just a second. It was small, but I saw it. When I left, I walked down the driveway, the air cold even though the sun was shining. I stopped by the window near the dining room. Through the glass, I could see Lydia sitting at the table, writing in a notebook. Tara was beside her, laughing at something on her phone, her face glowing in the light. I stayed there for a minute, watching. The life inside that house looked warm, full, and untouched by my absence. Then a gust of wind blew a dry leaf against the glass, and it stuck there for a second before sliding down. I turned away and walked back to my car. People say you can't lose a home if your name is still on it. But standing there that day, I realized something I should have known long before. I had left that house, but the truth was, that house had left me a long time ago. When Gloria walked into my apartment, she didn't waste time with small talk. She was still the same woman I remembered from our teaching days. Sharp, quick, and always 3 steps ahead. She carried a leather folder under her arm and a look that meant business. "Marjorie," she said, taking off her coat, "I've brought someone with me. This is Nora Kaplan. She's a lawyer who specializes in family property cases." Nora was around 50, maybe a little older. Gray hair, neat suit, clear eyes that studied everything without saying much. She shook my hand firmly. "Mrs. Latham, I've looked into your situation. Gloria told me you want to sell the house." I nodded. "Yes, as soon as possible." Gloria opened her folder and spread out some papers on my small kitchen table. "Before we go any further," she said, "Nora needs to ask you a few things. It's routine." Nora took out her notepad. "Do you have any kind of lease agreement with your son or daughter-in-law? Anything written? Any record of rent payments? I shook my head. No, it was just family helping family. They moved in after my husband passed away. It was supposed to be temporary. Nora frowned slightly. That's both good and bad, she said. Good because you never gave up legal ownership. Bad because after living there for more than 2 years, they might claim a form of residential right. That's what we call implied tenancy. It could slow the sale down if they decide to fight. Gloria leaned forward. But we can still move fast if you're serious. The market's hot. A property like yours will sell in a week if priced right. We'll just need to be careful with how we handle the listing. I looked at both of them and said, I'm serious. My voice came out calm, not angry, just calm. I don't want to think about it anymore. I just want it done. Gloria nodded. Then we start tomorrow. Nora studied me quietly for a moment. Before we proceed, she said softly, you should know what you're walking into. This could get messy. Once your son and his wife find out, they'll likely push back. Emotionally, legally, maybe both. I'm used to messy, I said. She tilted her head. It's different when it's your own family. I didn't answer right away. I looked around my apartment, the small living room, the plain curtains, the empty coffee cup on the counter. It wasn't much, but it was mine. That thought gave me more strength than I expected. Gloria tapped her pen. We'll need the deed, property tax records, and your ID. I'll handle the paperwork for the listing. Nora will look into any liens or financial claims. Financial claims? I asked. Gloria glanced at Nora, then back at me. It's just a precaution. Sometimes, when relatives live in a house that isn't legally theirs, they take loans against it without the owner knowing. I felt a chill go through me. They can do that? Nora nodded. Not legally, but it happens. If they redirected your mail, they could have had access to your documents. That's why we'll check everything. I sat there for a moment, trying to absorb it. I thought back to all the times I'd asked Evan if he needed help with the bills, and he'd smiled and said, "It's all taken care of, Mom." I thought of how Tara insisted on managing mail because she was so organized. I rubbed my hands together slowly. All right, I said finally, and check everything. Gloria smiled a little. That's the Marjorie I remember. PTA chairwoman, never lost an argument. I gave a small laugh. That was a long time ago. Nora closed her notepad. It doesn't matter. You've still got the fight in you. Her tone wasn't flattering or kind. It was matter of fact. And for some reason, that made me sit up straighter. For years, I told myself that being quiet was the right thing to do. That patience was strength. That love meant forgiving, no matter how it hurt. Sitting there with those two women, surrounded by forms and documents, I realized how wrong I'd been. Nora handed me a pen. If you're ready, sign here to start the process. I looked down at the line, my name printed neatly beneath it. Then I thought of the house, of my wedding photo taken off the wall, of my husband's chair gone, of Tara's laughter echoing through rooms that once felt like safety. I signed. Nora and Gloria exchanged a quick glance. Gloria said, "We'll handle everything quietly for now. No one needs to know until the listing goes live." I nodded. Good. Then I said something I didn't plan to say, something that just came out. If they want to fight me, they can. I've spent 3 years watching them take everything piece by piece. If I have to fight to get my life back, then I'll fight. The room went silent for a second. Nora nodded once. Then let's get to work. That was the moment everything shifted. I wasn't the mother trying to keep peace anymore. I wasn't the woman who stayed quiet to keep the family together. I was just me. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. The next morning, Gloria came back to my apartment with a brown folder tucked under her arm. She didn't smile this time. She set the folder on the table, sat down across from me, and said quietly, "Marjorie, there's something we need to talk about." I knew from her tone that it wasn't good. She opened the folder and pulled out a few printed pages. "I did some checking with the county office last night. There are a few home equity loans taken out under your name. Total amount, $75,000. I stared at her. That can't be right. I never applied for any loan. Gloria slid the papers toward me. The documents are real. Signatures, account numbers, everything looks official. My throat felt tight. $75,000, I repeated. Who? How? She looked at me for a moment before answering. That's what Nora's looking into now. Almost on cue, Nora walked in a few minutes later, holding her laptop and a small notepad. She nodded to Gloria, then sat beside me. "Mrs. Latham," she said, her tone calm but firm, "I pulled your credit report. There are multiple accounts you probably don't know about." "What do you mean, multiple?" "3 credit cards, 2 consumer loans, and a line of credit. All opened in your name, all tied to the address on Birchwood Lane." I blinked. "That's my house. My old house." "Yes," Nora said. "All the billing statements and notices have been going there. It looks like whoever did this had access to your personal information. Social security number, bank statements, probably mail." It took me a moment to understand what she was saying. Then it hit me. "You're saying my son and his wife?" She didn't answer right away. "Mrs. Latham," she said carefully, "what I'm saying is that someone who lives in that house has been using your identity. This is not a misunderstanding. It's a crime." For a while, none of us spoke. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. Gloria finally broke the silence. "We'll contact the credit bureaus, freeze all your accounts, and file a report. But first, you need to see this." She turned one of the pages toward me, a list of recent transactions. I leaned closer, reading line by line. $8,000, travel agency, Mexico. $3,200, jewelry store. $450 tennis academy tuition. I frowned. "Lydia doesn't even play tennis." Nora nodded. "Exactly. This isn't about family expenses. It's about lifestyle." I kept reading. There were restaurant bills, spa services, luxury stores, charges that had my name on them, but nothing to do with me. My hands started shaking. "I trusted them," I said quietly. "I let them handle things because I thought it made their lives easier. I thought I was helping." Nora looked at me with steady eyes. "That's what most people think until they see the paperwork." I picked up one of the statements, ran my finger over my own name printed at the top, Marjorie Latham. The signature at the bottom was mine too, or at least it looked like it. A perfect imitation. "They even copied my signature," I whispered. Nora nodded slowly. "It happens more often than you'd think, especially when it's family. It's easier to trust, easier to overlook things." I set the papers down and leaned back in my chair. The room felt smaller. The light coming through the blinds hit the table in thin stripes, making the papers look even whiter. For years, I'd believed that betrayal was something that came from strangers. You see it on the news, scams, frauds, people tricking the elderly. You never imagine it's your own son doing it, or the woman who calls you mom. I sat there for a long time, staring at the documents, reading the numbers over and over again. Each charge felt like another small cut, something taken that I hadn't even noticed disappearing. $8,000 for a vacation I never took. $3,200 for jewelry I'd never wear. $450 for lessons my granddaughter never had. Gloria reached across the table and touched my arm lightly. "We'll take care of it," she said. "You're not alone in this." I nodded, but my eyes stayed on the papers. I could see my name on every one of them. Bold letters at the top, printed perfectly, neat and confident, like the person behind it knew exactly what they were doing. I said quietly, mostly to myself, "I used to think deceit was something people did out of desperation, something strangers did for money. I guess in a family, all it takes is a forged signature." The phone rang early the next morning. The sound was sharp in the quiet of my apartment. I hesitated before picking it up, already knowing who it would be. "Mi, kungwoy, goy mejang ban nha, kunham lan gihong." Evan's voice was tight, the kind of tight that comes from fear wrapped in anger. I held the phone to my ear, keeping my tone steady. "Kong ham jo, Evan. Kanha kwatoy jang juoch ban." He was silent for a second. When he spoke again, his voice cracked just a little. "Milam the fan boy. Bon kon song o jobanam. Me hong the lam the juok. Kong kona." I took a slow breath. "Fanboy laki menam vien va konan toy trong hakwame. Chupan roy chang len mang. Jo moy la fanboy." The silence on the line stretched long enough that I could hear him breathing. Then another voice cut in, sharp, too smooth. "Tara." "Baluon tech gai kichtin, bai kong," she said, her tone dripping with mock sweetness. "Ba jung la drama queen, luk nao kung tim kash la moi, shuyen shui quan min." I didn't raise my voice. "Ko le, Nung toi la drama queen koi kung kashin goi moon gap. Evan tried to step in. Me, ninge konoi je. Kung Khan, I said. Me nge ju roi. I hung up before either of them could speak again. For a moment, I just stood there, phone still in my hand, the dial tone humming softly. Then I set it down, walked into the kitchen, and started making coffee. The quiet sound of the kettle boiling felt peaceful, almost ordinary. I poured the coffee into my favorite mug, the one thing I had left that still felt like mine, and sat at the table. Outside, the morning light came through the blinds, pale and cold. The phone buzzed again on the counter. I didn't move. I knew what it would be: messages, calls, maybe even apologies dressed as accusations. I let it ring until it stopped. I took a sip of my coffee. It was strong, bitter, just the way I liked it. For the first time in years, it didn't taste like guilt. 10 minutes later, another call came in. I ignored it. Then a text, then 3 more. Evan, Mom, you're overreacting. Tara, you're being cruel. We're family. Evan, we can fix this. Just stop the sale. Tara, you don't know what you're doing. You'll regret this. I read every word slowly, like I was studying handwriting from strangers. Then I put the phone face down and whispered, I already did regret it. For 3 years. The apartment was silent again. No voices telling me to calm down. No one rearranging my things. No one deciding what was best for me. Just me, my coffee, and the faint hum of the refrigerator. For a long moment, I sat there thinking about the word family. It's supposed to mean safety, but sometimes it becomes a shield people hide behind while they take what isn't theirs. The phone lit up again. Another call from Evan. I let it ring until it stopped, then unplugged the charger and set the phone aside. I looked at the clock. It was still early. The day had barely started, and yet it already felt lighter. I poured myself another cup of coffee and opened the window. The air outside was crisp, carrying the faint smell of rain. For the first time in a long time, it felt like the world was breathing with me, not against me. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. I sat back, took another slow sip, and let the warmth fill me. It felt steady, clean, and final. They'd call again, they'd shout, accuse, maybe even beg. But the decision was already made. The house was mine to sell, and my silence was mine to keep. That night, I couldn't sleep. The papers from Nora and Gloria were still on the table, and every time I looked at them, my chest tightened again. I made tea, sat down, and pulled out the old leather notebook I used to keep for grocery lists. The pages were yellowed at the edges, the cover soft from years of use. I hadn't written in it for a long time. I opened to a blank page and started writing. December 25th, 2023, Christmas. I brought them gifts, warm jackets I'd saved up for. They gave me a candle from the drugstore clearance shelf, still with the sale sticker on it. I smiled and said thank you anyway. February 2nd, 2024, my birthday. They forgot. 2 days later, a text came. Happy belated, Mom. I replied, thank you. That was all. April 10th, 2024, dinner invitation. I cooked a full meal, set the table, even bought wine. An hour before dinner, Tara called. We're exhausted, Mom. Maybe next week. That same night, she posted a photo at a steakhouse. Caption, date night finally. I kept writing. The words came slowly at first, then faster. Every page filled with small moments that I had brushed off, forgotten, or excused. The kind of moments that didn't seem like betrayal when they happened, only when you look back and see the pattern. There were dozens of them, missed calls, forgotten holidays, smiles that didn't reach their eyes, sentences that started with, Mom, don't take this the wrong way, and always ended with something that hurt. Halfway down the last page, I stopped and looked at what I'd written. The ink had smudged in places. My handwriting trembled. Then I wrote one more line, slow and clear. Today, I no longer want to be loved. I want to be respected. I sat back and read it over. It didn't sound bitter. It sounded honest. Just then, my phone rang. Nora's name appeared on the screen. I answered. Nora? Her voice was calm, but there was an edge of urgency. Marjorie, I just got an update from a contact at the courthouse. Your son and his wife have been talking to an attorney. They're preparing guardianship documents. I blinked. Guardianship? What does that mean? It means they're planning to have you declared legally incompetent, she said. If that happens, they'll control your assets, your bank accounts, even medical decisions. You'd lose the right to act on your own behalf. For a second, I couldn't speak. I stared at the notebook still open in front of me, at the line I'd just written about respect. Then I asked quietly, "Can they really do that?" "Not if we move faster," Nora said. "But you need to understand this isn't just about money anymore. This is about control." I nodded slowly, even though she couldn't see me. "They've already taken enough." Nora's voice softened. "You're stronger than you think, Marjorie. We'll handle it." After she hung up, I sat in the dim light for a long time. The lamp cast a weak yellow glow across the wall. My shadow flickered against it, trembling a little, but my eyes stayed fixed and steady. They could forge signatures, open credit cards, take what didn't belong to them. But there was one thing they would never have again: my silence. They could take the money, the house, even try to take my name, but they would never take my voice. That night, Nora came over with Gloria. The three of us sat at my kitchen table again, surrounded by folders, papers, and a laptop that hummed quietly. This time, I wasn't just watching, I was part of the plan. Nora spread out the documents. "First, we file the property sale. That will secure your ownership legally and freeze any chance they have to claim it as a shared residence. Once it's listed, they can't use it as collateral or access it financially." Gloria added, "Second, we report every fraudulent account tied to your name. We'll contact the banks directly and flag the identity theft. Once it's documented, they won't be able to open anything else using your information. And third," Nora said, tapping her pen, "we prepare witnesses. Anyone who's seen how they've treated you, friends, neighbors, family. The more statements we have, the stronger your case." I nodded slowly. "And if they fight back?" Nora looked me straight in the eye. "Then we fight harder." There was no hesitation in her voice, just certainty. We stayed up late that night, going over every detail. Gloria handled the property forms, Nora drafted legal notices, and I sat quietly, signing where they told me to. Each signature felt like a piece of my life being put back where it belonged. By midnight, the plan was in motion. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing something, not just enduring. The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and sat by the window as the light crept in. It was quiet, but not empty. I could hear the world outside, cars, voices, life. I took a sip and thought, maybe this is what taking your life back sounds like. Then came a soft knock at the door. At first, I thought it was Gloria again, maybe with more paperwork. But when I opened the door, it wasn't her. It was Lydia. She was standing there in her school sweatshirt, holding a small pink suitcase. Her eyes were red, her cheeks blotchy like she'd been crying for hours. "Grandma," she said, her voice trembling, "Mom said you're selling the house and that we're going to be homeless." I stared at her, my heart sinking. I stepped aside and gently pulled her into my arms. "Oh, sweetheart," I whispered, come here." She hugged me tight, her little shoulders shaking. "Mom's really upset. She said you hate us. She said you want to hurt our family." I held her for a long moment before answering. "No, darling, I'm not the one hurting anyone. The people who made you come here alone, they're the ones doing that." She sniffled. "They didn't come upstairs. They said I should talk to you first. Dad's waiting in the car." Of course he was. I brought her inside, set her suitcase down, and asked softly, "Have you eaten anything?" She shook her head. "No." I started boiling water for noodles, the kind she used to love when she was little, as I moved around the small kitchen. I tried not to let her see how my hands were shaking. When the noodles were ready, I sat her at the table, added an egg and a bit of green onion on top. Simple, warm, familiar. She picked up the chopsticks but didn't eat right away. "Grandma," she said after a moment, "at Christmas last year, Mom and Dad said they were going to visit someone sick. They told me I couldn't come because I might catch it. So I stayed with my friend Emma's family." I nodded slowly. "I remember you saying that." She looked up at me. "Were you the sick person?" The question stopped me cold. I put down the spoon I was holding and sat across from her. "Yes, sweetheart," I said quietly. "It was me. I was in the hospital." She blinked, confused. "Then why didn't they tell me?" I didn't know how to answer that without breaking her heart, so I just said, "Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices even when they think they're protecting someone." Lydia looked down at her bowl. Mom said you make everything harder, that you always want attention. I smiled sadly. Maybe that's true, but wanting to be treated kindly isn't the same as wanting attention. She finally took a bite of the noodles, chewing slowly. Her eyes filled with tears again. I don't want you to be alone, Grandma. I reached across the table and touched her hand. I'm not alone anymore, I said. You're here. We sat like that for a while, her eating quietly, me just watching her. I realized that this was what I'd been missing. Simple, honest company. No pretending, no control. Just love that didn't need to take anything in return. After she finished eating, I helped her wipe her face. Your parents are waiting, I said gently. I'll walk you downstairs. When we reached the lobby, I saw Evan's car parked outside. He was in the driver's seat, phone in hand. Tara was in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, expression tight. She didn't look at me. Lydia turned to hug me again. Grandma, please don't sell the house. Mom says we won't have anywhere to go. I smiled faintly. Sweetheart, you'll always have somewhere to go. You'll always have me. She nodded, trying to smile through her tears, and walked to the car. I stood there watching as they drove away. Back upstairs, I sat at the kitchen table again. The bowl from Lydia's noodles was still on the counter. The air was warm, the window fogged from the steam. I looked at the empty chair where she'd sat and whispered, they can lie to everyone else, but they can't lie to her forever. Then I picked up the phone and called Nora. It's time, I said. Let's file everything. That afternoon, I saw Evan's car pull up in front of my apartment building. It was the same silver sedan I'd helped him buy years ago. I watched from the window for a moment. The engine stayed on. Tara sat in the passenger seat, her sunglasses covering half her face. She didn't move. A knock sounded at my door, not from them, but from Lydia. She stood there again, small and uncertain, twisting her fingers around the strap of her backpack. Grandma, she whispered, Dad's downstairs. He said I have to go home. I nodded slowly. All right, let's go down together. When we stepped outside, the air had that heavy stillness that comes before rain. Evan rolled the window down as we approached. He looked pale and restless, his jaw tight. Me, he said sharply. Konbe noi gi voi me chua? I met his eyes. Chi la su that thoi? He frowned. Mi jang hui huai gia jin nei. I took a slow step closer. My voice was calm, but I made sure he heard every word. Evan, nukon kon dung Lydia je ip toi them mot la nua, toi sekintem toi lam dung tre em. The words hung in the air between us. For the first time, he didn't have a quick answer. His mouth opened, then closed again. His face went blank. Tara shifted in her seat, gripping his hand tightly. She wouldn't look at me. Her nails dug into his palm, and for a second I saw fear in her expression. Not guilt, not remorse, but fear of losing control. Evan finally spoke, softer this time. Mi kon kong lam gisai, chung kon chi mon on jin cho giajin. I shook my head. Giajin kong juoch sai bang doi tra, Evan. No juoch sai bang sudat. Va kon ja fa jo jo roy. He looked away, eyes on the steering wheel. Tara leaned slightly toward him and whispered something I couldn't hear. I turned to Lydia. Go ahead, sweetheart. Get your things if you need to. She didn't move. Her small hand found mine and held it tightly. Ba oi, she said softly. Kon kong muon ven ha. For a moment, everything stopped. The sound of traffic, the air around us, even the faint noise from the open car window. Evan looked startled. Tara's head snapped toward her daughter. Lydia, she said sharply, get in the car, now. But the girl didn't move. She just stood there beside me, her hand gripping mine like she was afraid I might disappear if she let go. Konmuon olai voi ba, Lydia said again, louder this time. Her voice cracked, but she didn't cry. Tara exhaled sharply, then looked away, pretending to check her phone. Evan opened his mouth, but no words came out. I looked at both of them, my son, the boy I once raised to be kind, and the woman who had turned him into a stranger. And I realized that I didn't owe either of them my silence anymore. I've already spoken to my lawyer, I said quietly. If you try to force her or use her again to guilt me, you'll hear from the court next, not from me. Evan's eyes flickered, anger, disbelief, maybe shame. He started the engine. Tara muttered something under her breath. I caught only one word. Pathetic. I didn't react. I just stood there, my hand still holding Lydia's, while the car idled in front of us. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, without another word, Evan put the car in gear and drove off. Tara didn't look back. The sound of the engine faded down the street. The wind picked up, whistling softly between the buildings. A few dry leaves skittered across the pavement and pressed against the curb. Lydia was still holding on to me. Her fingers were cold. I pulled her closer, wrapping my arms around her shoulders. She didn't say anything else. We stood there for a while, just the two of us, watching the empty street where their car had been. I could feel her breathing, fast and shaky against my chest. When the last sound of the car disappeared, I whispered into her hair, "It's all right now. You're safe." She nodded against my shoulder, but neither of us moved. The wind rattled a loose sign nearby, and a few leaves swirled up into the air. The street was quiet again. I looked up at the gray sky and exhaled. It felt like the air itself was finally clearing. Not clean, not peaceful, but real. We went back upstairs without saying another word. I closed the door behind us, locked it, and for the first time since this began, the silence didn't scare me. It felt like a beginning. A week later, Nora came by with a thick folder. She set it down on my kitchen table with a heaviness that said everything before she even spoke. Gloria was with her again, standing by the counter, arms folded, face tight. Nora opened the folder. Inside were dozens of printed pages, notes, and highlighted transactions. "I hired an investigator," she said quietly. "He finished the report last night." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She flipped through the first few pages, then paused. "Marjorie, before Evan and Tara moved in with you, they lived with your husband's aunt, Margaret Latham." I frowned. "Aunt Margaret?" "Yes, I remember. She passed away a few years ago. I thought they were helping her." Nora exchanged a glance with Gloria. "That's what everyone thought, but the financial records say otherwise." She tapped the folder. "During the last 8 months of Margaret's life, nearly $80,000 disappeared from her accounts, all transferred to a joint card shared with your son." I sat back in my chair. "You're saying they did this before?" Gloria sighed softly. "It's a pattern. Same structure. They move in, gain trust, take control of finances, redirect mail, and isolate the person. First it was Margaret, then you." Nora continued, her voice low and even. "We also found evidence that they forged documents, online authorizations, linked accounts, and several digital transfers under your name. The handwriting on the physical forms matches Tara's. The digital ones trace back to Evan's IP address." I stared at the papers, at the numbers running down the pages like a foreign language I didn't want to learn. Gloria reached for the stack and flipped to one of the statements. "Here," she said quietly. "This is how they did it. They created secondary user accounts on your cards, with your name still listed as the primary holder. Then they added their bank information. Every transaction looks legitimate unless you know what you're looking for." Nora nodded. "They even changed the mailing address to your house, so every notice came straight to them. You wouldn't have seen a single bill." For a moment, I couldn't feel my hands. The papers in front of me blurred. So this wasn't about family help. It was planned. "Yes," Nora said, "from the beginning." Gloria took a breath. The investigator found text messages between them discussing your accounts. They joked about streamlining things for you. It wasn't care, it was control. I sat there, staring at the lines on the page. Account numbers, transaction histories. My name typed over and over in black ink. "I used to teach first graders to read," I said quietly. "Letters, numbers, small sentences. I told them every word had meaning." I picked up one of the pages, scanning the columns. Now I'm sitting here learning to read again. This time, the crimes of my own family. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. Nora finally said, "We're preparing to hand this over to the district attorney. Given the pattern, it's not just fraud, it's elder abuse and identity theft. There's enough here for criminal charges." I nodded slowly. "Do it." Gloria hesitated. "Marjorie, are you sure? Once this starts, it won't be quiet. The police, the court, it'll be public." "I don't care," I said. "They've already made a fool of me in private. It's time everyone sees what they really are." Nora closed the folder. "All right, we'll move forward." She looked at me for a long moment before adding, Most people in your situation back down. They get scared. You haven't. I smiled faintly. I was scared for 3 years. That's long enough. Gloria gave a small nod, her eyes softening. We'll take care of the rest. After they left, I stayed at the table, the report still open. The numbers and dates stared back at me. Endless rows of transactions that told a story of greed written in plain language. Outside, the afternoon light was fading, the sun catching on the edges of the folder. I ran my hand over the cover, feeling the weight of it. It didn't feel like paper anymore. It felt like proof. I whispered to the empty room, they can forge my name 100 times, but they'll never own it. Then I closed the folder and set it aside. The phone rang just after sunset. I almost didn't answer. I'd stopped picking up unknown numbers weeks ago, but something made me press accept. The voice on the other end was shaky, young, but heavy with hesitation. Mrs. Latham, my name is Sophie. Sophie Whitmore. I'm Tara's sister. I froze. What is this about? There was a pause, the kind where someone is trying to decide if they're brave enough to continue. Please don't hang up. I've been reading about what's happening. I saw the articles and I think I can help. Her voice trembled, but there was urgency in it. You need to know something about my sister. This isn't the first time she's done something like this. My fingers tightened around the phone. Go on. About 15 years ago, she said quietly, Tara lived with our grandmother, Grandma Rose. She was in her 80s, still sharp, but she had trouble walking. Tara offered to help, handle her bills, take care of the house. At first it seemed good, but after a while, Grandma stopped calling the rest of us. Tara said she was tired, confused. Then we found out she'd been added to all of Grandma's bank accounts. I didn't breathe. Sophie's voice cracked. Grandma tried to tell me once on the phone. She said Tara made her sign some papers, something about power of attorney. A few months later, she was moved into a care home. When she died, there was nothing left. Over $200,000 gone. The accounts were empty. I swallowed hard. And you stayed quiet all these years? I was ashamed, she said softly. I thought maybe it wasn't my place. And Tara? She's manipulative. She made everyone think Grandma was losing her mind. I told myself there wasn't enough proof. But I kept the old bank statements, the emails, even the signatures. I still have them. I closed my eyes for a moment, the phone pressed to my ear. Sophie, if you really have those, send them to me. To my lawyer, right away. I will, she said, voice shaking again. I should have done it years ago. I'm sorry. You're not the one who should be sorry, I said quietly. There was silence for a few seconds. Then she whispered, Mrs. Latham, my sister has always known exactly what she's doing. I hope you stop her. When the call ended, I sat still for a long time. The room was dim, the last of the daylight fading against the window. I could hear my own heartbeat, steady and slow. Then I reached for the phone again and called Nora. She answered on the second ring. Nora, I just spoke with Tara's sister. Her name's Sophie Whitmore. She says Tara did the same thing to her grandmother. Forged documents, took everything. Nora's tone shifted immediately. Do you have details? She said she has the old statements, proof of power of attorney abuse. She's sending them now. I'll keep an eye. Out, Nora said. If that's true, it changes everything. It shows a pattern and premeditation. Within an hour, my inbox pinged with a message from Sophie. Attached were scanned documents, old checks, authorization forms, account transfers. The handwriting was the same looping script I'd seen on my own forged papers. Gloria came by the next morning. I showed her the printed pages. She stood by the window, flipping through them one by one. It's all here, she murmured. The same transfers, the same forged signatures, the same lies. Nora joined us shortly after, carrying a fresh stack of printouts. The investigator confirmed everything, she said, placing the new report on the table. The money trail matches perfectly. Tara's been doing this for years, with every person who trusted her. Gloria let out a long sigh. A repeated pattern. Same plan, same victim type. It's almost scripted. She looked up at me. Do you realize what this means, Marjorie? You're not just protecting yourself anymore. You're ending something they've been getting away with for 2 generations. I looked at the growing pile of papers. Margaret's case, Grandma Rose's, mine. All of it connected by the same handwriting, the same false kindness. I see it now, I said quietly. They've been running the same story over and over. Gloria nodded. And now? I smiled faintly, though it didn't reach my eyes. Now I'm the last character in their script. Nora gathered the files, her movements precise. Then let's make sure it's the final chapter. As they left, I stood by the table, staring at the documents spread across the wood like pieces of a puzzle. The pattern was so clear now. Trust turned into theft, love turned into control. I whispered to the empty room, "They used to write the story, but this ending belongs to me." The courtroom was cold, too bright and too quiet. Everything echoed, the shuffle of papers, the creak of chairs, the low hum of whispers. I sat in the second row beside Lydia, her small hand wrapped around mine. Nora was in front of us, focused, calm as always. Gloria sat on my other side, a steady presence. Evan stood by the defense table. His shirt was wrinkled, his face pale. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. Tara sat next to him, her hair tied back neatly, her jaw clenched. For a moment she looked at me, but I didn't look away. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The sound of the gavel cut through the room. We'll now hear the final statements in the matter of Marjorie Latham versus Evan and Tara Latham. Evan's attorney nudged him. He stood, his hands trembling slightly. Your Honor, he began, I only wanted to help my mother. Things got out of control. I made mistakes, but I never meant to hurt her. Nora rose smoothly. With respect, Your Honor, she said, her voice steady, helping your mother does not involve taking loans in her name, forging her signature, or diverting her mail. What Mr. Latham did wasn't help. It was theft. Sustained, deliberate, and planned. Evan's voice broke. Mom, I'm sorry. I just thought we'd fix it later. I didn't answer. I couldn't. There was nothing left to say. Tara sat rigid, staring at the table. Her lawyer tried to speak, but the judge held up a hand. I've read enough, he said firmly. And I've seen enough. He picked up a sheet of paper and read from it slowly. Evan Latham, found guilty of identity theft, financial fraud, and elder abuse. Sentence, 2 years imprisonment with restitution of $127,000 to the victim, Mrs. Marjorie Latham. Evan lowered his head. His shoulders shook once, then stilled. The judge continued. Tara Whitmore Latham, found guilty of aiding and abetting fraud and identity misuse. Sentence, 18 months community service with mandatory financial counseling and probation supervision. Tara's mouth tightened. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. When the gavel fell, the sound felt final. Not triumphant, not satisfying, just final. As the officers led Evan away, he turned once, eyes wet, voice small. Mom, please. I looked at him for a moment, long enough for him to know I'd heard, but I didn't speak. Some words come too late. Tara turned next. She stopped halfway to the door and looked toward Lydia. Sweetheart, she said softly, almost pleading. Please say something. Lydia didn't look away. Her voice was quiet but clear. Konkong tin minua. The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Tara's expression cracked. Shock first, then something close to grief, before she turned and walked out without another word. The courtroom emptied slowly. Nora gathered her files. Gloria touched my shoulder gently. It's over, she said. I nodded. No, I said after a pause. It's finished, but it'll never really be over. Lydia squeezed my hand tighter. Grandma, are you okay? I looked at her, 12 years old, brave, honest, already learning what most adults never do. That truth costs something. I'm okay, I said softly. We're both okay now. We walked out into the sunlight together. The sky was pale, the air clean. The world hadn't changed, but something in me had. Outside the courthouse, the reporters were waiting, their voices overlapping, cameras clicking. Nora guided us through them quietly. Lydia held my hand the whole way. When we reached the car, she looked up at me. Grandma, are you happy they're being punished? I thought for a moment. No, I said. I'm not happy, but I'm not afraid anymore. She nodded, leaning her head on my arm. As the car pulled away, I looked back once at the courthouse steps. Evan and Tara were gone. Only a few reporters remained, talking to each other, their voices fading with the distance. For years, I'd lived with fear. Fear of losing my family, my home, my dignity. That fear was gone now. What replaced it wasn't joy, but something steadier. Peace, maybe, or strength. That night, after Lydia fell asleep, I sat by the window watching the city lights flicker. The papers were gone, the trial was over, and all that remained was the quiet sound of breathing from the next room. I whispered to myself, no victory makes you young again, but some victories stop you from growing old with fear. The house at Willow Creek wasn't big. A small white wooden cottage with 2 bedrooms, a porch, and a yard that opened toward a line of maple trees. When I turned the key and pushed the door open for the first time, the air smelled of wood, sunlight, and something I hadn't felt in a long time. Safety. It wasn't perfect. The floors creaked, the paint on the porch railing was chipped, and the kitchen window stuck halfway when you tried to open it. But when the breeze from the forest rolled in, carrying the scent of pine and wet grass, I smiled. It's not much, I said to myself, standing in the doorway, but everything here belongs to me, even the quiet. Lydia ran from room to room barefoot, laughing as if the sound itself could build new walls. Grandma, can I make the attic my reading place? You can make it anything you want, I said. Later that afternoon, she went into the yard with a hammer, some old wood and more determination than I'd seen in any adult. By evening, a small structure stood between 2 trees, a crooked, beautiful little treehouse. She nailed a sign above the door, the letters uneven but bold. No drama queens allowed. I laughed. A real laugh this time, the kind that didn't ache. I brought her lemonade and watched her climb up with a grin. The days that followed settled into a rhythm. Mornings with tea on the porch, sunlight stretching across the grass. Afternoons spent in the garden where our new neighbors, a kind couple named Helen and Frank, helped us plant wildflowers along the fence. They didn't ask about the past. They didn't need to. Around here, people cared more about how you were doing today than where you came from. In the evenings, Lydia did her homework on the porch while I cooked. We ate dinner outside under the soft glow of the porch light, listening to the sounds of crickets and the wind through the trees. No shouting, no tension, no pretending. Just peace, plain and quiet. One night, as we sat together, Lydia told me about her new school. My teacher says I'm good at writing, she said proudly. We're doing a story project next week. What will you write about? I asked. She thought for a moment. About 2 people who built a house together and made it safe. I smiled. That sounds like a good story. After dinner, we stayed on the porch, watching the stars appear. The woods behind the house were dark, but not unfriendly. The air was cool. Lydia leaned her head on my shoulder. Grandma, she said softly, I like it here. It feels normal. Yes, I said. That's what peace feels like. It doesn't ask for proof. It just lets you rest. She nodded, half asleep already. Does that mean we're safe now? I looked at her, the porch light catching in her hair. Yes, sweetheart, I said. We're safe. Inside, the clock ticked softly. The house creaked once, as if it was breathing with us. I carried Lydia inside and tucked her into bed. When I came back to the porch, the night was quiet except for the sound of crickets. The stars above Willow Creek shimmered like a promise, not of a new beginning, but of a life finally reclaimed. I sat down with a cup of tea and watched the wind move through the trees. Every gust sounded like forgiveness. Every silence felt like ownership. For years, I had been surviving inside someone else's version of my life. Now, for the first time, I was living in my own. In the window behind me, Lydia's drawing hung crooked on the fridge, 2 stick figures holding hands beside a house with a big sun over it. She'd written one line underneath in her uneven handwriting, Me and Grandma, no drama here. I smiled, feeling the kind of peace that doesn't make noise. In Willow Creek, no one asked for explanations. No one made me prove I was right. Here, all that mattered was that we were still standing, whole, honest, and home. The room was small but bright, a circle of chairs, a whiteboard at the front, and a poster on the wall that read Elder Abuse Prevention and Recovery Center. I stood in front of the class, holding my notes. A few faces looked up at me. Women and men around my age, some older, some younger. All of them carried the same quiet weight in their eyes. My name is Marjorie Latham, I began, and I used to think that being patient made me a good person, that staying silent kept the peace. But silence isn't peace, it's permission. A few people nodded. One woman wiped her eyes. I smiled softly. We're told we're too sensitive, too dramatic, too difficult. But that's not true. We're not too sensitive. We're just too trusting. And trust, I paused, should never be a weapon used against us. For a moment, the room was completely still. Then I said, "They called me a troublemaker, a drama queen, but I call it survival. And survival," I looked around the room, "is not shameful. It's brave." When the session ended, a few people stayed behind to talk. One man told me his daughter had emptied his account while saying she was helping him manage it. A woman whispered that her nephew had sold her jewelry to pay bills. I listened to every word. I didn't have all the answers, but I had proof that recovery was possible. Later that afternoon, I walked home. The sun was low, turning the edges of the trees gold. The small house at Willow Creek stood ahead of me, its white paint glowing in the light. I could hear Lydia in the yard, her voice clear and bright. "Grandma, the treehouse bridge is finished." I laughed, the sound soft and easy. "I'm coming, sweetheart." I stepped inside to put down my bag. The kitchen smelled like cinnamon and tea. On the counter sat my notebook, the same one I'd once filled with the list of betrayals. Now it held different words. Notes from my class. Letters I never sent. Thoughts I wasn't afraid to say anymore. I sat down for a moment and opened it. On the last page, I had written a single line. "I lost my home once. Then I learned that home isn't a place. It's the peace you refuse to give away." I closed the notebook and stood up. Outside, the light was warm and soft. Lydia was waiting by the new bridge she'd built between two trees, her hair catching the sunset. "Grandma, come on," she called again, laughing. I smiled, stepping out into the yard. "I'm coming," I said, "and I'm not going anywhere ever again." The wind moved through the leaves, carrying her laughter through the trees. The camera would have pulled back if this were a story. A small white house, a golden sky, the sound of laughter carried by the breeze. The sun slipped lower, turning the world amber and quiet. For once, there was no tension to break, no truth to uncover, just the sound of life continuing, gentle and steady. No victory makes us young again. But some victories stop us from growing old with fear. We can't change what was taken, but we can decide what stays ours. Our name, our truth, and our peace.